You've probably said it to a kid today or heard it said to you once. Don't touch that. Stay where I can see you. Hold my hand. It feels small, automatic, almost thoughtless. But that instinct, the one that makes your whole body tense the second a toddler wanders too close to a road, is not new. It is not modern. It is not something we invented with car seats and baby monitors. It is a survival system that is at least 2 million years old, and it had to work almost perfectly, almost every single time, or none of us would be here. Because here is the uncomfortable math. For most of human history, keeping a child alive to adulthood was not the default outcome. It was the exception. Anthropologists estimate that in many hunter-gatherer societies, somewhere between a third and a half of all children died before the age of 15. Some estimates for the deep past run even higher. Disease, falls, animal attacks, starvation during a bad season, childbirth itself, which was its own quiet catastrophe, dangerous for the baby and often fatal for the mother. So the question isn't really how did ancient humans keep every kid alive? They didn't. The question is, how did they keep enough kids alive, generation after generation, in a world with no hospitals, no antibiotics, no refrigerators, and often no permanent home? And the answer is stranger and more human than you'd expect. Let's start with the first tool they had, which wasn't a tool at all. It was other people. Anthropologists call it alloparenting. That's just a decoded way of saying care from someone who isn't the biological parent. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, unrelated adults in the group, all sharing the job of keeping small humans alive. This wasn't a nice bonus. It was structural. Researchers studying groups like the Hadza in Tanzania and the AK in Central Africa have found that a child might be held, fed, or watched by 10 or more different caregivers before they're even weaned. Human babies are unusually needy compared to other primates. They can't cling to fur. They can't walk for over a year. They're born early, developmentally speaking, because our skulls have to fit through a narrow pelvis, so a huge amount of brain growth happens outside the womb in a state of total helplessness. One mother alone could not have kept that helplessness alive. It took a village not as a nice phrase, but as a literal engineering requirement. There's a theory called the grandmother hypothesis that tries to explain something odd about human biology. Most animals stay fertile until close to the end of their life. Humans are one of the only species where females routinely live decades past menopause. Why would evolution keep you alive long after you can no longer reproduce? The proposed answer: because a grandmother who is done having her own children can pour all of that energy into keeping her grandchildren alive instead. She can gather food, watch toddlers, and free up the mother to have another child sooner. In this view, menopause itself isn't a flaw in the system. It's a feature built to protect children who were already born. Now let's talk about the second system. Not people this time. Space. If you watch how mobile hunter-gatherer camps are structured, even today, there's a pattern. Children under about 4 are almost always kept within arm's reach of an adult, usually the mother, carried on the hip or the back for the vast majority of daylight hours. Not because ancient parents were anxious, because the environment genuinely could kill an unwatched infant in minutes, a cook fire, a venomous animal, a steep drop. But something shifts around age 4 or 5. Kids start moving in loose, mixed-age packs, roaming just outside the camp, usually with an older child, maybe 7 or 8, functioning as the supervisor. Not an adult, a kid put in charge of other kids. This sounds almost negligent by modern standards, but it was, in its own way, a genius solution. It let adults keep gathering food and doing the work that fed everyone, while still keeping a rough safety net around the youngest members of the group. And it trained the older kids in exactly the skills they'd need later: reading danger, managing conflict, watching for threats, years before anyone called it responsibility. There's a term for this: the license to roam. Even in early 20th century studies of children's independent movement, researchers found each generation was allowed to travel farther from home alone than the one after it. We've been shrinking that radius for decades, but for most of human history, that radius was enormous by comparison, because there simply weren't enough adult hands to keep every child physically contained. Now here's where it gets even stranger. Ancient parents didn't just manage danger with supervision, they managed it with belief. Look at almost any culture with an oral tradition, and you'll find a strange, recurring shape. Stories designed specifically to frighten children away from exactly the hazards that killed the most kids in that environment. Water spirits that pull children under the surface in cultures near dangerous rivers or coastlines. Forest monsters that snatch wandering children in cultures near dense woods where getting lost meant dying of exposure. Figures that punish children for wandering too close to a cliff edge in mountainous regions. These weren't just bedtime stories. They were survival software installed through fear, because fear is fast and stories are memorable, and a 5-year-old can't yet understand statistical risk but can absolutely understand a monster. It's the same mechanism, just repackaged, that makes you flinch when a toddler gets near a pool today. The story changed. The reflex didn't. Then there was the body itself, quietly built for this problem long before culture ever stepped in. Newborn humans have a set of reflexes that look almost designed for survival in a world with no cribs. The grasping reflex, where an infant's fingers curl tightly around anything pressed into their palm, strong enough in the first weeks of life to support real weight. Some researchers believe this is a leftover from a time when infant primates needed to grip onto their mother's body fur while she moved, climbed, or fled. Human infants don't have fur to grab, but the reflex remained anyway, a ghost instruction left over from an earlier version of us. And it isn't only the baby's body doing quiet, automatic work, it's the parents too. Multiple studies have found that when an infant cries, especially at night, a parent's heart rate and skin conductance spike within moments, faster than conscious thought. This is sometimes called the parental alarm response, and it doesn't seem to be something we learn from a parenting book. It shows up across cultures, across species even, mammal mothers responding to the specific frequency of a distressed cry, sometimes able to tell their own infant's cry apart from others within days of birth. You weren't taught to feel that jolt of panic when a baby screams. You inherited it fully installed from a lineage where the parents who didn't feel it, who slept soundly through a hungry or endangered cry, were simply less likely to pass that trait forward. That's really the quiet, almost brutal engine behind everything in this video. Evolution isn't kind. It doesn't reward good intentions. It only keeps what works. Every reflex, every story, every social structure we've just walked through exists today in some form, because in the version of humanity that didn't have it, more children died. The ones who survived passed down grandmothers who stayed engaged after menopause. Communities that shared the labor of watching small bodies. Myths sharp enough to scare a child away from a cliff before language could explain why. Nervous systems that respond to a cry before the mind even finishes waking up. None of it was designed on purpose. It was assembled slowly out of 100,000 years of trial and error with children's lives as the stakes. So the next time you feel that instinctive tightening in your chest when a kid gets too close to the edge of something, or you catch yourself instantly registering a change in a baby's cry from another room, or you notice a grandparent who seems almost more invested in the grandchildren than anyone else in the family, you're not just watching a person be careful or loving or kind. You're watching a very old, very patient piece of machinery, one built across millions of years and countless lost children, still quietly doing exactly the job it was built to do. You've probably said it to a kid today, or heard it said to you once, and now you know it isn't just a habit, it's an inheritance.